Well, good evening. I'm in a pit right now. Why am I in a pit? Well, over the past few weeks, we have been studying Bible characters who have been stuck. There are characters who were not allowed to go where they wanted to go and do what they wanted to do. And we talked last week about Paul being imprisoned, and he was on house arrest for several years. That wouldn't have been fun. We began the series talking about Noah and the ark. He was in the ark for a whole year. Then we talked about Jonah in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Not fun at all. So, what's tonight's character? Well, if you haven't guessed it by the fact that I'm in a pit, we're going to be talking about Joseph tonight. Joseph, we all know the story. He got thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery, ended up in prison, but eventually became the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. So, the big difference between the pit he got thrown in and the pit I'm in right now, he couldn't get out of his pit. I can get out of mine. I voluntarily came down into this pit. I can voluntarily get out of it. I hope I can, anyway. He couldn't. He had his freedom taken away. He had his movement restricted. He was sold into slavery. So let's go on back to the office and we'll look at a little bit deeper at this story of Joseph. Why would Joseph's own brothers throw him in a pit? Why would they try to murder him? Why would they want to act this way towards him? Well, Joseph was having some dreams. He was having some visions, and in those dreams, all of his family is bowing down to him. He's the one in charge. He's the head honcho, and the rest of them are all servants. Now, that happens on top of the fact that he's already considered the favorite son. He got a coat of many colors, and it just says it plain as day, Genesis 37, verse 3. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons. Joseph is the favorite. Joseph gets treated like the favorite. And then Joseph starts having dreams that puts him over and above all the rest of them, which leads us to Genesis 37, 18 through 28. This says, "They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, 'Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams.' But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, 'Let us not take his life.' And Reuben said to them, 'Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father.' So, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of the robe of many colors that he wore. And they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, 'What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he's our brother, our own flesh.' And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt." All right, so let's consider our own siblings. If you have brothers or sisters, think back to what your relationship was like with them when you were younger. Now, you might have been one of those weirdos that got along great and everything was perfect and you never fought at all and you guys were like best friends. Most people, that doesn't happen. For most people, you probably fought a lot. You didn't get along with your brothers or your sisters. There's bound to be some sibling rivalry. There's bound to be some tension and some friction in the household. I love my sister to death. I'd do anything for my sister, but we did not get along growing up. We did not like each other growing up. We fought like cats and dogs. But even if you have a bad relationship, even if it is a bad relationship with your sibling, would it have ever come to this? Would it have reached the Joseph proportions? Imagine that you're one of the brothers living in this household, and Joseph is announced as being the favorite, right? He's given this coat, which is a big old symbol of he's the favorite. We all like him way more than we like you. And then he starts coming in and he starts telling you you're going to be bowing down to him. You're going to be subjective to him, and he's going to rule over you. That would have been really annoying. That would have been so frustrating. It certainly would have made me mad. It would have just really got my blood boiling. I get the impression, and I cannot prove this, it doesn't actually say this in the Bible. I can just see it in my head. I get the impression that Joseph is one of those really annoying kids. In my mind, I see him as one of those people that's bragging even though they don't realize they're bragging. I get the impression he's a little bit entitled. He's the favorite, and while all the other brothers are out there working, he's not. And he thinks, well, this is just life. I'm just always the favorite. I'm at the top. People do other things and give it to me. He expects things to be given to him, even in the worst possible circumstances. Even if we assume that Joseph is just the worst. He's just the most annoying. He's the most frustrating, entitled person in the world. Even if your brother Joseph is the most awful individual ever, would you plot to kill him? Would you actually want to murder him? Let's go back and read verses 18 through 20. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." I don't know about you, but that sounds really, really vindictive. Let's kill him, and then we'll see how those dreams turn out. Let's kill him, and he won't be bragging so much then, will he? They really, really hate him. And this isn't just sibling rivalry. This isn't normal brothers roughhousing and beating each other up and pulling pranks on each other. This isn't, hey, let's throw him in the pit and leave him there for a while, because that'd be really funny, but we're going to pull him back up and go home before dinner time. No. Let's kill him. Let's kill him. Consider what this must have been like for Joseph. You probably already know that there's some animosity there. You already know that your brothers don't really like you. But on this particular day, when you're out looking for them and you finally do find them, they throw you down in this pit. And at this point, they don't know what they're going to do to you. They haven't actually decided it yet. Their only plan up to this point is, let's kill him. Reuben convinces them not to. Let's hold him in the pit for a while. But really, they want you dead. They want you dead. And I don't think they lowered him into this pit. They didn't get a ladder and say, why don't you go ahead and go on down there. They didn't give him a rope and say, we're going to lower you down. They didn't help you down in there. They threw you in. They threw you in. You can probably see the murder in their eyes. You can see the hatred in their eyes. They want to kill you. They don't care about you when they throw you in that pit. Put yourself in his shoes. You know something's not right. You got a real bad feeling about this. In a second, pause this video and discuss what that must have been like. What you don't know is everything that's about to happen to you. You don't know that you're going to be going to Egypt. You don't know that you're going to be a slave. You don't know that you're going to be in jail. You don't know any of the rest of that story yet. All you do know is this isn't good. My brothers threw me in this pit, and I know they don't have good intentions for me. The situation has changed. Go ahead and pause this video right now and discuss what that must have been like. So Joseph ends up being sold into slavery. He goes to Egypt and he ends up in Potiphar's house. And let's read chapter 39, verses 1 through 6. It says, "Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate." So basically, Joseph is in the best of the worst situation he could be in. He's a slave. He's taken down to Egypt. He is sold into slavery. That's bad. But he ends up being a slave to an important person who puts him in charge of everything. And Joseph probably has it pretty good there where he is. So on the one hand, where he is now is probably better than where he came from. As far as all the physical things, the house is probably bigger than the house he grew up in. There's probably a lot more stuff. It's a lot nicer stuff. There's more food. Everything is just bigger and it's better. It's pretty awesome. But on the other hand, does it really matter? You're a slave. You have no freedom. Here's another chance to pause this video and have a discussion. There is a saying, and there's some different variations of this saying, but the saying is, "I'd rather die free than live in slavery." I'd rather die free than live in slavery. Now, some people agree with that. Some people don't. Everybody's got a different opinion on that. So, I would rather die as a free man in my freedom than to live being a slave. Do you personally agree with that? And does it matter if it's a Joseph kind of situation where slavery actually means better stuff than you've ever had before? What if slavery meant you had more in life to enjoy? It's not really your life at all. Someone else owns you. But the enjoyment of that stuff, it's yours. How do you feel about all that? Go ahead and pause the video and discuss this situation right now. All right, so things are going pretty well for a while, but then it all comes crashing down. It all falls apart. Potiphar's wife gets involved and she messes everything up. She tells a lie about Joseph. And in Genesis 39:19 through 23, it says, "As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, 'This is the way your servant treated me,' his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed." It seems that Joseph is in the habit of rising to the top of places you really wouldn't want to be in the first place. Nobody wants to be a slave, but if you have to be one, do it like Joseph did. Nobody wants to be thrown into a prison, but if you got to be a prisoner, do it like Joseph did. Joseph is constantly making the best out of a bad situation. Well, we fast forward, and Joseph interprets some dreams. That leads to him interpreting dreams for Pharaoh. That leads to him being put in charge of and preparing for a famine. Joseph ends up being the second most powerful person in all of Egypt. He is second only to Pharaoh. And so things turn out okay for Joseph. And his dreams end up being true. And for Joseph, this ends up being a story with a happy ending. But it was a roller coaster getting there. It's a roller coaster of emotions. There's all sorts of ups and downs. There's good parts and there's bad parts and there's tragedy and all this stuff just to get to this final happy conclusion. Now here's the thing. We know from Scripture that Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery. That's Genesis 37, verse 2. And we know that he was released from prison and appointed as head over Egypt when he was 30 years old. That's Genesis 41:46. And so that means it was 13 years. 13 years from the time he is sold into slavery to the time he leaves the prison. Over the course of 13 years, he's in two places. He's either a slave in Potiphar's house or he's in prison. And the reason he's a slave is because his own family, his own brothers, turned on him and sold him. And the only reason he's in prison is because he is falsely accused. He is lied about. There's a book called Jasher. Don't know if you've heard of that or not. We don't consider the book of Jasher to be inspired. It's not a part of Scripture, but it is a part of the Apocrypha, if you've heard of that. And as such, even though we don't consider it inspired, it is a useful tool to know what was believed and what was being taught at the time that it was written. So the book of Jasher gives us a bit more insight into some of the historical stories. And in Jasher 44:76, it says, "And Potiphar heard their words, and he placed him in the prison house, the place where the king's prisoners are confined. And Joseph was in the house of confinement 12 years." Based upon this text, most Jewish commentators, most rabbis believe that Joseph was only a slave in Potiphar's house for 1 year. 1 year. And he then spent the next 12 years in prison. Can you imagine being in prison for 12 years because of something that wasn't even true? 12 years because of a lie. Once again, put yourself in Joseph's shoes. You spend 13 years as either a slave or in prison, and none of it is your fault. None of it's your fault. You didn't do anything to deserve it. Your own family sold you into slavery. You were lied about and sentenced to prison. How are you feeling through all of this? Are you bitter? Are you angry? Are you depressed? Go ahead and pause the video again and discuss what sort of mental state you would be in. Consider that it's been 13 years. And all of this stuff has happened. And you didn't deserve any of it. You didn't earn any of it. You didn't do anything to cause it. What are you feeling through all of this? Go ahead and pause and discuss it now. Well, in the end, we come to chapter 50. After he's gone through everything he does, he ends up as the second most powerful person in Egypt, and he tells his brothers in verse 20, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." This week, I checked the mail at the church, and we got a magazine, and attached with that magazine was this little book called The Coronavirus and Christ by John Piper. And I've got some cynical thoughts about this book, but we'll not get into that right now. But it's a short book. It was only 100 pages, and they're small pages, and so I just read through it real quick. And despite my cynicism, There was a really good part in there that caught my eye, and I just wanted to read it for you because it addresses Joseph's situation. He says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Genesis 50:20. "Be careful not to water this down." It does not say God used it for good or God turned it for good. It says God meant it for good. They had an evil purpose. God had a good purpose. God didn't start cleaning up halfway through this sinful affair. He had a purpose, a meaning from the beginning. From the start, he meant it for good. In all the stories that we have talked about so far, Noah and the ark, Jonah and the fish, Paul and his house arrest, and now Joseph as a slave and in prison, there was always something good that followed. There was always a purpose for it. It was always leading to something else down the road. God has a plan through it all. And even though all of this stuff happens because of evil people, because of evil intentions, because of evil thoughts, whatever it is, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. All of this stuff starts off knowing that God has something else on the other side of it that is good. We don't want this virus. We don't want this stay-at-home order. We don't want this new way of doing things, and yet I firmly believe God meant it for good. And so as we close this lesson and we close this series, go ahead and discuss what good has come out of all of this. Do you see good in your personal life? Do you see good happening because of this out in the community? Do you see good happening within your family, within your neighbors? Do you see good on a bigger, larger scale, a national scale? What good do you see that has come about because of all this stuff that we never wanted in the first place? I hope all of you have a great rest of the week. And I urge you that as you go through the rest of this week, keep your eyes open. Be on the lookout, because God is doing good things. And even though there's a lot of evil out there, and even though all of this is being caused by evil, God meant it for the good. So try to see that good this week. I'll see you all on Sunday. Have a great week. Bye.